Hello, this is probably going to turn into a series where I go through my animation files and show you what I've done, how I've structured things, and why I did the things I did for certain animations. So this was a TikTok animation and I'm going to play the finished one here, and then we're going to go through the file. So TV Paint is my main animation software. It's what I was taught animation with at university and honestly love it. I think it's probably the best investment I've ever made, and I paid around £400 or £500 for the professional version while I was a student. They do a really good student discount. So TV Paint 11 Pro should have been £1,100-1,200. There is a standard version, but you obviously don't get quite so many features. So the thing that sort of sealed the deal for me with the Pro version were all the blending modes, really. It's something that I use a lot in other drawing programs, and I wanted to be able to have that all in TV Paint rather than having to go to another software like After Effects and do all the textures and things there. So you get these, and you also get something called a CTG layer, which essentially makes colouring a lot easier, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So as you can see, I've got several different colours and layers, lots and lots of layers in this file. Anything in red is a rough animation and what I used to plan out the rest. And then we have white labels just here, which is the background layers. The purple up here is the texture for the animation, so that's above everything else. If I just hide certain things, this is what the actual colour palette was for the whole animation. So that's what they look like, and then if I turn them back on, as you can see, it makes everything a lot brighter. I really love using textures and I pretty much use them in everything I do, so having these in here was, you know, sort of a no-brainer for me. But I feel like adding texture to an animation, especially if it's got like a little grain, it doesn't matter if your animation is super simple. So this is a looping texture and I've got it set to 70% on overlay 2. There's two types of overlay blending mode in TV Paint. This texture lasts for 6 frames each, so I redrew the texture 4 times on 4 different frames, and each lasts for 6 frames. Hopefully that makes sense. And I've set the layer function to loop. It's set to none if I'm animating normally, loop for a loop. I don't really use ping pong, and hold is simply for backgrounds. Before, I did a lot of animations with shadows. If you've seen my final film for my university course, rule number 3, you'll notice that they've got shadows. Now that took a really long time, but I've started using textures more because even though this animation doesn't have shadows, which would make it look really nice, adding a little bit of texture does seem to give the same polished effect, I think. So this is the original TikTok. This girl is lip syncing to the song, and then when it cuts, it's like her dad does the screaming part of the TikTok. And I just thought that was absolutely hilarious. So basically my phone is full of TikToks that I have saved that I thought were funny, or I had an idea for a skit or something that I could turn into an animation. The good thing about TikTok is that the animations are very short, and I can just spend a couple of days and have one finished, which makes things a lot different from the usual 2-3 minute story times. I think my last one was 6 or 7 minutes, and they take so much time to make that making stuff for TikTok was actually a really nice change for me. When I find one, I save it to my phone and then I bring it into TV Paint to sort out the timing. So that was the original. So I've just hidden all the other layer groups, so only the red groups are showing, and these are the roughs. So the way I structure an animation is that I will do all the roughs first, but each character was on a separate layer, they weren't together. So the first character, which you can see here, she had a separate layer for her hair and she had a separate layer for her lip sync. And so this was counted as the animatic. The poses were fairly simple. just adding in a couple of small variations to help time out the action. And sometimes, if you can see up here, sometimes I'd write little notes to myself, help with the timing. There is a notes function in TV Paint. When you're using it, I use this typically for lip sync, but you have to zoom in all the way and then write it out like that. Makes making the notes more precise. And if you zoom out, it will sort of deform the letters and make it smaller. So if you aren't properly zoomed in and you write like this and then you zoom in, and it will stretch your actual letters out, and it'll be very difficult to do lip sync like this. So that's how I do lip sync. So once I've done the roughs, I'll then move on to the backgrounds. Now this one is super simple. TikToks tend to be quite short, so I don't want to spend like a massive amount of time on the backgrounds. And since the action is the actual animation, I don't want anything to distract from that. So with this one, they are in a club. So I used brushes from this palette. This is actually free on my Gumroad. I'll leave a link in the actual Patreon post for you to take a look at to make this sort of gradient. And then I made shadows on top for other characters to be dancing in the background. I could have made like a slight looping animation for them to dance to, but again, I wanted this to be quick and less detailed. We wanted the animation to be the focus. So after that, I made another layer, so a texture on top with the blending mode add and on 25%. So that's what it looks like on full blast, and if we move it back to 25%. So yeah, that's the background. So now we're back to the finished look. I'm going to talk about the rest of the animation. So we had the roughs, we've done the backgrounds, and now we're onto the line and colour. And the way I will organise that is I will give each character a certain layer colour. So the character that you see on screen at the minute, character 1, is in yellow, and you can change these by going here. So character 1 is yellow because of her yellow top, and it's just easier for me to recognise. This, my character 2 is a light blue, and then the microphone, which both of them hold but are used as a separate asset, is a darker blue. These orange layers are the colour, and they're orange because I use the CTG layers, which I'll explain in a minute. Now, as you can see, character 1 has several different layers for certain elements of her line work. So this is the line work for her body. It's like the main one. She has one for her hair, which is later on over here. She's got one for her eyes and her eyebrows in the beginning. Now, a lot of these layers will be split up along the timeline depending on which elements are in front or behind certain things. So it does get a bit complicated when character 2 comes in. So the reason she has so many different layers is because it's so much easier to organise and sort out the timings for each different piece. I didn't want to have to redraw the body every time or the eyes every time that the hair moved. As you can see, the hair does move quite a lot in comparison to everything else. So the body just here only has 1 or 2 keyframes every now and then. So we'll have this pose hold for a long time, but as she goes down to sing, there's like 3 keyframes and then it holds again. So I would always recommend separating out your animation onto different layers, just makes it so much easier. Now if we scroll down a little bit, this is where character 2 comes in and things get a little bit more complicated. In this section here, this is where our hand goes over the top of character 1 and her elbow and pushes her out of frame. So there's a couple of ways that I could get the hand to be above character 1. I could redraw it separately, or I could just duplicate the line and colour layer and get rid of the frames that I didn't need before and afterwards, and then use the eraser tool to remove everything that wasn't needed above the character. It does take a little bit of time. Sometimes it is a little difficult and you do have to go over the top to make things look a bit cleaner, but it does save time in the end. So this is what the whole thing looks like when it's been lined. This is very clean. I used one of my brushes from my brush pack. So now I'm going to show you my process for colouring in a character in TV Paint. So I will use the CTG layer a lot. So if I go to New, color and texture layer, that's the CTG layer. It will create a new layer beneath my line art, and it will reference the structure of my line art. So every frame in the line art will have a corresponding frame in the color layer. I hope that makes sense. So I'm just going to choose a colour. I'm going to go for this light pink, and I'm just going to click and drag, and sometimes it will fill in other areas of my line art, and that may be because there is a gap somewhere in the line work and it will flood fill the rest. Now the CTG layer basically acts like a bucket fill tool, and I can keep adding individual colours. Now, a fast way to colour in your character if they don't move a lot is to use this process. So if I draw a line, TV Paint will actually save that position of the line until I draw another one, and then it will save that. Now, what I mean by this is that I've drawn this line. If I move to my next keyframe and press enter, TV Paint has saved and pasted that line there. So as you can see, the line doesn't move, but the next frame is actually filled. So if I choose yellow here and go like that, I can move to the next frame and press that. I can also highlight these frames and press enter. And as you can see in this one, it's filled. In this one, it's still filled, but the line has moved outside of the drawing, so it hasn't filled anything, but it worked for these two frames, which is great. That does save some time. So let's say I want to colour this bit in a different colour, so I'm going to choose this one. You want to make sure that this toggle auto break instance is off, because if it is on, I just select it and I've moved here and I do that, it will flash like that because it's made a new frame rather than going to the head of the animation. So if I undo that, turn it off again and draw it like this, it only affects the head of that frame. So I can highlight, press enter, and it will have coloured in the rest of these. If I have it on and I've highlighted and pressed like that, it will make a new frame every time, which is very annoying, very annoying. So usually if you have the CTG layer, that will be off. So obviously once the line and colour were finished, I did the texture, which is the purple layers that you can see on the screen now, and I was done. I exported it as a .mov file from TV Paint and sent it to my phone, and I'll either use Google Drive or just send it to myself through email and download it on my phone and then upload to TikTok like that. So that is the end of this deep dive into this particular TikTok animation. I'm sure there will be other files that I'll go through in the future. If you've got any requests for YouTube videos that you want me to take a look at again for YouTube animations or TikTok animations that you'd like me to go over, I will do this format of video again. Obviously, if you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll do my best to answer. So thank you so much for watching and stay safe.